Welcome to today's episode of Thoughts from the Greenhouse. I am Renée Wills, co-founder and client lead for Brick City, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Todd Greene, who is SVP Omnichannel Marketing. And we have a special guest with us today, who is an author of a book, and we're going to get to that in a second. But first, we wanted to start with, what is this episode about? And I'm sure as healthcare marketers, you've probably encountered the issue that the uptake on the things you just rolled out, they could be materials, programs, technologies to the sales force. You're sitting scratching your head wondering, why isn't the sales force using them more? And today's guest has studied that problem. And in fact, she wrote a whole book about it. And it's called The Omni Advantage, Accelerating the Behavioral Change with Omnichannel in Pharma Sales Engagement. Welcome to Mehrnaz Campbell. And just a bit more about Mehrnaz. She is the founder and CEO of Cheemia, which is a Scottish pharma engagement consultancy, and she leads remotely here from the United States. She has a background spanning nursing, big pharma leadership roles at GSK, Pfizer, and Takeda. And with her over 38 years in healthcare, she's known for transforming how pharmaceutical companies connect with healthcare professionals. And in 2020, she launched Cheemia Reset, which is an award-winning digital platform that empowers field teams to thrive in today's hybrid engagement. Her book, The Omnichannel Advantage, and her Refocus program have cemented her status as a global voice on shifting from product pushing to meaningful customer-centric engagement. So Mehrnaz is also the 2024 Women in Pharmaceutical Agency Role Model of the Year. Congratulations, Mehrnaz. A Goldman Sachs 10K SB graduate, named one of the top 12 marketing and omnichannel experts to follow in 2025 by Medical Watch, and a relentless advocate for marginal gains, mindset shifts, and unleashing the true human potential to create a healthier world. So welcome.
Thank you so much, Renée and Todd. I'm really delighted to be joining you, and really excited to have a conversation with the talented marketeers in US about what this new way of working and engagement is all about.
Well, in your book, what was really exciting was speaking to this problem, because often as marketers, we wonder what's going on, and we are blaming the sales force for not being effective. Why aren't they using my tools? Why haven't they used the platform more? Why are they going back to that paper sales aid? So your book deals with this problem, and you have suggestions to address it. So why don't we start with what you've uncovered?
Sure. I think there's a few faults to this, and I think it's like any problem. I love problem solving. You need to understand the root cause of the problem, because once you understand the root cause, then you can address it. So the first thing is, I just want to tell you a story. 2 years ago in May 2023, I was moderating a panel discussion at the Next Pharma Summit in Dubrovnik, and the audience were 200, talented marketeers across Europe, commercial leaders. And I asked them 3 questions. The first question I asked them was, do you honestly believe the campaign you have developed and the communication you're putting out to HCPs directly addresses their pain point? If you think it does, please remain standing. If you have any doubts, please sit down. Renée and Todd, half the audience sat down, and I really love their honesty. And then I said, to those of you standing, I've got a second question. Put your hand on your heart and say, do you honestly deliver this relevant content to HCPs at the time they need it? If you think you do, please remain standing, otherwise sit down. You know what happened? Everybody sat down. I was coming to my third question, which you see in my book, I've got this triangle, and the third question was about the channel. But the reality is, if your communicating is not relevant, if you're not delivering it at the time they need it, the channel is redundant for now. And if you notice, the book is not called The Omnichannel Advantage, it's called The Omni Advantage, because it's not about the channel at all. It's about meeting the HCP's need at the time they need it, through the medium they prefer to use. So Viva Pulse reports actually shows that 75% of the content created for field to use is not used. It doesn't see the light of the day. And if you think about how much time marketeers, medical compliance spend approving these materials, that's heartbreaking, right? So why the reps are not using it, we can go into it. But one of the reasons is because the content is not relevant. They use it with one or two HCPs, they see their eyes rolling and they think, okay, I'll put it back in my bag and have a different conversation. And I think making it relevant is so key for communication. And I think in today's world, I think a lot of the reps during the pandemic, they were forced to embrace this new way of working. And they thought, okay, we can't wait for the pandemic to be over so we can go back and see people and travel and everything goes back to normal. The reality is the HCPs preferences and the way they communicate has shifted. They've really benefited from this digital way of engagement. It saves them time. It is much more agile. You know, if you have a digital communication, they can get information quickly. And nowadays, our preferences, all of our preferences have shifted. If you want something, you want it now. You don't want to wait to go to the shops or wait for it. You know, we reach out to Amazon and order it and they expect it to be delivered a few hours later. HCPs are the same. They expect information to be available, you know, at the touch point. So gone the old days of reps saying, oh, I'll create a request, go back 2 weeks later, deliver it. You need to be agile because it helps them make those decisions much faster and it can bring other stakeholders into the conversation. So HCP's preferences have shifted dramatically. And there's a data by Across Health now known as Precision IQ that shows that in US, what HCPs expect mix of face-to-face and digital is much higher than what pharma is delivering. There's a digital gap of 14% to 15%. And if companies close that digital gap, and if the reps are more motivated to go and use digital channels and engage them through different channels, you can actually have an increase in turnover between 5 to 10%. And if you think about the pharmaceutical industry's value or your company value, what would be 5 to 10% of that means? That's a huge amount of growth by closing that digital gap. But the reason the reps are not embracing it is because they're not comfortable. You know, they all been trained to do selling face to face. They walk into the room, they feel they've got their swagger, they can kind of like read the room. But when you ask them to do the same thing through Zooms or Teams or digital channels or email, they feel a handicap. And if I use an analogy to describe what I'm saying, like all of us are comfortable about driving. You know, we get in the car and we don't think about it. But when we first started, we had that fear about, you know, would I gonna crash the car? Would I hit a wall? Would I be able to reverse park? But we got confident. And in the same way, the field force got confident selling face to face and they can walk in and be confident. And then going to digital is like giving them a Formula One car. You know, if they gave me a Formula One car or you, Renee or Todd, we'd probably be just scared of driving and thinking I'm going to go skid off the road or, you know, hit something. So what we do, we leave it on the tarmac, sits on our drive, we don't drive it. And that's exactly what's happening with the field team. You give them the tools, but because they don't have the skills and the comfort zone of using it, they just park it. They just go back to what they're comfortable with. And I think that's another challenge. You need to invest in shifting field teams' behaviors and create a safe sandbox for them to play, make mistakes, try it. In the same way we had that comfort zone when we learned to drive. And then once they get comfortable with it, then they'd be more willing to adapt it. And I think it's always like, what's in it for me? If they can see the real benefit in shifting, and we've done that through kind of like mindset shifts that we've done, then they love it. They suddenly realize, you know, digital is not a threat, it's not going to replace my job, it's going to enable me. It's the same thing with AI. It's going to enable me to be like have superpowers. And then they can see the level of engagement increases, they have more appointments in their diaries. And it becomes a two-way communication. It's not them chasing HCPs all the time, trying to see them. HCPs are reaching out to them because why would they share it? Mm-hmm.
What I just heard you say, and I love the stories, is sort of three things. One, just to, for our listeners, just to kind of concisely bring that back. One is that the message is not relevant. Two, they haven't been adequately trained on the technology. And three, they still have an old mind shift, and we need to bring them along so that they shift their mindset to see how this technology and this method, really omni-channel, is real, or omni. I know you said not channel, but omni is to their benefit. So let me get back up, and I'd like to, if we can, sort of like get into each one of those. So the first one being the message not relevant. Now, I will say that some of our marketers who are listening are probably like, well, I do market research and I've talked to doctors, so the message should be relevant. Now, I've been a sales rep and a marketer, and I kind of get both sides of that, because often the market research that is not research that is, it's not involving a rep. Sometimes you can involve a rep, but sometimes it's sort of this, and no matter what, it's still like a faux situation that's not like real, and it's not customized to the situation. And then the other thing about that is that it has the sales force themselves been brought into it. So those are kind of things that come to my mind as a marketer, but I get like this initial reaction of, oh my gosh, like I've talked to the sales force, but did you really? Like, how involved did you get them? And, I did market research. So the message should totally be relevant. They should accept that. So I don't know, Mehrnaz, where would you go with that? What advice would you have for our listeners?
I think there's always been like tension between marketing and sales. We tell them what to do, they should go and do it. We say jump, they should say how high. But the reality is, if you be really honest with ourselves, the marketing needs to change its mindset shift, because what we do, we focus on promoting a brand. Our whole campaign is around how to communicate the benefits and features of this brand. But the reality is, the HCPs are not interested in their brand. They want solutions for their problem. Like, let me ask you something. Do you have a drill? Like, if you buy a drill, it's not because you need a drill. You buy a drill because you want a hole so you can hang a picture to make your house feel like home. So right. In the same way, HCPs are not interested in the brand. They have a problem. If your brand addresses that problem, that's when you become interested. So the marketing needs to shift in terms of communication, rather than broadcasting the brand to agitate the pain point that the HCPs or the patients are experiencing. And the brand is not the hero of the story. The brand becomes the Yoda of the story that allows the hero to go along their journey. And you need to, it's market research, you need to look at it for the lens. Are you using market research as a crutch to justify what you were planning to do anyway? Or are you using market research to give you insight to really understand the pain point and connect with the HCPs? And if you're really honest with yourselves, we often want validation about what we're going to do. But it's not about broadcasting and talking about it, it's about really listening. And one of the best channels to get that insight is the field team. The field team can provide that. So if you want to develop content, one easy way of achieving that, co-create it with the field team. Get validation from them, not at the approval stage saying, this is what I've prepared, go and die, use it. At the earlier stage of ideation to see whether this is actually going to float or not. And I find when we do co-creation with the field team input, they're on the material, they feel really passionate about it. And guess what? They're more likely to go and use it, whether that's a rep triggered email, or is a detail aid, or any campaign. You involve them, you create ownership. So I think we can't blame the field force, we can't blame the marketeers. I think we need to align better as a collaborative team, saying, what is the problem we're trying to solve for the patients or the HCPs? And then how our brand can help solve that problem. Does that make sense, Renée?
It totally does. And I guess when I think about co-creation, there's many ways. I mean, do you have any best practices that you would want to share around co-creation? Because certainly there's rep advisory boards and, where you bring in a rep from the field and then you have that rep kind of go on stage and help you present. But I mean, are there any best practices that you would share as far as a practical, because, a lot of in the United States, we have big sales forces often. And so you can't involve everybody. So usually you involve a couple.
Yeah, I think doesn't matter how big or how small you are, you can adopt it. But the key thing you need to ask yourself is, I often tell marketeers to write on a post-it pad and stick it on their screen is, what is the problem you're trying to solve for HCP? And how is your campaign or material you're developing is going to address that? Because that keeps you anchored on relevance. And I think that's the sweet spot that brings connection between you and the field force, because the field force, our salespeople just want to help people. Selling is not about doing something to someone. Selling is about doing something for someone. And they really want to help their customers. They really want to help the patients. So I think if you both, including medical, gather your heads together to say, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And how is our brand helping to solve that problem? You're on a really strong start, because that would engage HCPs, not just talking about us, talking about their problem.
And Mehrnaz, I would say to that, from my perspective, when we create content, that it's the chronology of this rep involvement. This co-creation is oftentimes appended at the end, when it should be, like you're saying, from the very beginning, co-defining, if you will, the problem straight from the beginning, before we get too far into the outlines and the content outlines and the creation of the actual content. Right up front, from kickoff, let's define the problem together, and you sort of merge that, perhaps third-party research, maybe there's HCP advisory boards, but you merge at the same time, simultaneously, right up front, before kickoff, at the very beginning, the reps, and have them help define the problem straight from the beginning, even before the content's produced.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Todd. If you kind of like created the ideas and approved and you're just getting them to test it, that's too late, because they can't really change anything to shape it. And it happens, but it doesn't mean it's the end of the road. I'll give you an example. A few months ago, I do sales directly with HCPs and bodies at a national level in the UK still. So a client of ours asked us to launch a brand, and I looked at the detail. Honestly, it was just so boring, so many pages, small font, no pictures. I'm thinking, like, really? I said, oh, this is the final approve. This is what you've got. I said, okay. And it was in read-only mode because I couldn't make any changes. I'm thinking, that's even worse. I can't even hide some of the slides. I said, okay, if that's all I've got, I just like play with it. So I kind of used it with a couple of customers, and she loved some elements of it. So I bookmarked the pages she said, and she said, can you share this with me? I said, no, I can't share this with you, but let me go back to the client. I went back to the client. I said, 4 pages, really resonated. Can we have this in PDF so I can approve PDF with information like summary of product characteristics so I can share it with her? They did. And then there was a conference 2 weeks later. They had them, all those PDFs that this customer highlighted as key pertinent for shifting her adoption from not knowing from this brand, but using it as a preferred brand. We're summarizing these 4 pages. And they were like standalone printed leaf pieces. And they resonated with everybody else because she was representing that group of customers who think similar to her. And coincidentally, she came to that meeting, and I said to her, Louise, look at these. These are your ideas. She said, oh, you're not just saying this like making me feel good. I said, no, Louise, the day you told me that, I took back to the base, told the company, and the marketing changed this, and you created this. She felt amazing, and it was real. And I think just listen to the feedback from the field force. Those 4, on average, as I said, 75% of material are not used. On the detail aid side, the research shows reps on average use 4 pages. See what those 4 pages are. Ask them and say, what is it about it that you love it so much that you're using it? What is it about it that resonates with the customers? And then build on that. You can repurpose that into, email campaign, into something else. Because what resonates with customers, obviously, is your golden nugget. You can repackage it in different formats. And, that creates more engagement.
I think part of that, the technology that's available today is a nice hybrid of qualitative and quantitative, right? So say you have 35-page presentation. If you're using your Viva tools and your digital tools, you're able to quantify, here are the pages that have all that dwell time. Here's the actual slide that reps are using. And if you combine that knowledge with the conversations that you've had on a qualitative basis with your reps, then you're getting this sort of perfect combination of what works and what doesn't work. And so I think it's just making it happen, and it's making it happen as early as possible, like you're
Yeah.
saying. And then, and I think an important thing you talked about too was that feedback loop, going back to them and saying, congratulations and thank you, right? We're
Yeah.
seeing the needle move, and you are the reason why. And I think closing that loop and celebrating together is a big part of it.
Yeah. And I think when the field team realize the value of digital communication on top of their face-to-face, then they become the orchestrator of that. Like in our Cheemia, we promote brand on behalf of other pharma companies, like smaller companies that may not have a field force themselves. And for each of the brands, we've got between 7 to 10 approved email templates that we can use. And all of them, without exception, have been initiated by the field team. Because what happens is you encounter a scenario, somebody asks you a question, and you need to respond to that. So we say to marketing, this is a scenario I encountered. Can I have a approved content to address this? And then you find other lookalike customers who have the similar problem and address it. Like, let me give you an example. At this conference, when I was launching the brand, two people who are responsible for budget came to talk to me, and they were a bit like sheepish, didn't want to engage. Hang on. And then I said to them, look, we're not trying to increase the market with launching this brand, because we know you're trying to curb the budget. But within that, we have an alternative that gives a benefit for the patient and is more cost effective. I said, oh, that's interesting. And I said, look, she said, can you send me an email? I said, look, I've got an email that we've got approved for the healthcare professionals. Is that going to address your need? She looked at it. She said, no. She said, I want you to tell me what you just told me. Tell me that this is not going to increase our budget. Tell me that is within contained and it allows us to do what we're trying to do, but save money. I say, okay. She was representative of a group of customers that I have other places. So I got a template approved based on communicating what she wanted to her, but we can use that with other lookalikes like her. So listen to the feedback to customers to see what they tell us they want to hear, what format they wanted, and how to frame it. Because framing is so important. It gives the context so they can trust us, rather than just saying they're broadcasting their own messages.
So that point, I think about that on two levels: listening, right? Understanding, empathy. So we have our customers, we have doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals and patients. But on the other hand, as marketing folks, our customers, in some ways, if we really think about it, are the sales organization, right? And listening to them, the same thing we need to do. We need to understand them and be empathetic to the sales organization, and sort of transitioning then to that second area. So we were just talking about messaging not being relevant, but the second area of adequate training. But I think it's actually bigger than just training. And maybe this overlaps with mind shift, but what comes to mind for me is the reluctance of sales organizations, that old school paper stuff and the concern about Big Brother. And so there's different levels of fear, and having empathy with where the sales organization has come from, because they've come from, the old days where they were like the gods and they carried the bag, and I used to be one of them, and marketing made materials and sales did what they want with them, and they were all paper. And then all of a sudden came all these Big Brother things and hybrid and Omni and all this stuff. And so I don't understand it. I don't want to change. I have a fear of the technology. I have a fear of being watched. Empathy and understanding all of that, I think, is really key. And that's really what I read. I recall from your book, like that's a big piece. And maybe you want to comment further on that.
Yeah, sure. And I've got a lot of empathy for your listeners as well. Let me start with that, because with all this new technology, is expectation from you to just do this, do that, do the other. And with AI, you need to do it at speed. And it seems as if you're on like a treadmill running all the time, and we have this imposter syndrome that we're never good enough marketeers. I just want you to breathe just for a minute. Just take a breath in and exhale, right? You know, when I told you about that relevance, this is your ticket to do less, not more. So I want you to kind of like say, I don't need to do everything, but imagine like 75% of the content you create is not going to be even seen. So you need to maybe do less. And
maybe
it's
that's
not about doing more.
freeing.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
freeing, because I know sometimes there's this churn as a marketer where we're expected to get out all these materials and we got to check this box and this box and this box. And yes, I've heard the phrase less is more, but how often is that actually deployed? And so that idea of focusing on the quality and not the quantity is potentially very freeing.
Yeah.
There's less busy work in our lives.
Yeah. So I don't want your listeners to walk away saying, now I've got to do all of this and listen and do co-creation, blah, blah, blah. No, I just want you to say, if 75% of what you're doing is not being seen in the field, maybe you could do less, maybe do 4 things, like the 4 pages that are get used, and repurpose it. And that frees your time to think, ground, connect, and listen more. So I think is a mental health strain on all of us using technology and digital that was just like, even with AI can enable us to do things faster. So we're probably cramming more in there. No, make time for yourself, because that allows you to think, and creativity comes when you relax and you like sit back on your heels. So that's a key message for you as individuals.
So that's
Breathe.
amazing.
Yeah.
But let's deal with the technology itself, because there is training. You know, you go to the POA meeting and there's training. When you speak about training, what do you really need? What is actually necessary to get these folks on board?
You know, it's always going to be something in it for them. You know, the reps feel threatened. You know, it was the main channel of communication. I joined Pharma in 1992. And when I joined, we didn't even have computers. We didn't have iPads and laptop. You know, the whole emphasis was on us. And we go to cycle meetings, all the emphasis is on the field team because they're the main channel. And I think that the field team feel a bit threatened. Maybe, you know, they feel they're no longer needed because they're going to be replaced. And the reality is, when it comes to HCP engagement, digital plays a role, but you need that human connection, because you need to feel something to shift your behavior. And HCPs would only change the prescribing behavior if we shift their emotion. And I've talked to many HCPs. They say, you know, the companies send me email content. They get my e-permission. Like there was a cardiologist saying he worked with this big pharma company on a project on respiratory. He said, I'm a cardiologist. I get bored doing cardiology. I'm in my 50s. So they got me involved in this project. I really enjoyed it. So at some point they captured his consent. He said, I came back to my clinic 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm receiving email on the respiratory portfolio. I'm thinking like, why would I care? So sometimes digital doesn't know the context, but the rep always know the context. They walk in the room, they feel somebody's moody, they change the flow because they sense and read the room. So you need to have a combination of both digital and human. But if the reps are reluctant and they see it as a threat, you can't overcome that. You need to make them feel safe, make them feel valued. Listening would make them feel valued, especially if you act on their feedback. But you need to give them a safe environment for them to get their arms around these new ways of working. I mean, I'll go into a lot of detail in the book about different challenges, but we need to break these barriers between sales, marketing, medical, compliance, because at the end of the day, you know, omnichannel allows us to do something so much bigger than ourselves. I mean, I used to be a nurse. When I was a nurse, maybe I could influence the life of 28 patients I cared for, or when I worked in ITU, one-to-one with that patient who was critically ill. But working in the pharma industry as a marketeer or, you know, market access professional, when I work collaboratively with a wider collaborative team, we make difference in lives of thousands and millions of people. So this is a tool for us to create a healthier world. but we need to understand it. And it's not about the channel, it's not about the tool. It's about understanding as an industry, we've got solutions that could change people's life, prolong their life, improve the quality of life. How can we communicate and connect better that we're addressing what really matters rather than creating noise and being busy? What can we do deliberately and intentionally to really make an impact in the lives of patients? And when you do that as a company, as a team, you shift the perception. You're not seen as a message bearer delivering marketing messages to doctors. You're seen as a trusted advisor who genuinely care about the outcome of the patients, and you partner in them on that journey. And that makes the reps feel amazing because they don't see themselves as just the postman. We are making a difference in the patient pathways and the outcomes they're having.
So the
And
why is so
absolutely
the why. I always like to say that that the what, right? We all focus on the what all the time, but the how and the why are much more interesting than the what in the end, and are so critically important, because otherwise the what is flat, you know, and not necessarily acted on. But Mehrnaz, if I, as a marketer, what would you suggest to our listeners? Like, how do you get the reps on board? How do you train? Not, well, on board is a broad thing, but how would you train them? Let's say you're rolling out a new technology, right?
Yeah.
What are some tips that you would have to really roll out that technology so that the reps feel comfortable with it?
I think it depends on the situation. I think it depends on the relationship between the marketeers and the field team. If there's trust, there's much higher engagement. But if they're seen as like them and us, you need to address that. And I think break those barriers, because, you know, if somebody you trust makes a recommendation, you run with it. You know, even we book hotels based on recommendation of people we don't know because we trust them. But if there's lack of that trust, you always like take everything with a pinch of salt. So I think you need to work on that relationship, and what unites us all to build that relationship is having a common goal. So what's the common goal between sales and marketing? The common goal is for us to work together with medical to help address the pain points of the HCPs and patients. So it brings us back on relevance. So the relevance is not just an anchor for engaging at HCPs, it's an anchor to unite us all internally, because that's what we hear. That's what we hear. Okay, we get a salary and everything, and we need to work to make a living. But what's our purpose? Our purpose is to create a healthier world, and we can do that better together. So if a marketeer has a campaign and wants to engage the field team, they need to think about, how is this going to make the job of the representative easier? How is it going to help them book more appointments? How is it going to help them to be able to communicate more effectively? And if they're not sure, talk to them and be open to listen to that. Because if somebody came to you, Renée or Todd, and say, look, I've prepared this for you, but can you look at it to make sure it actually meets your expectation and needs? Not the finished article. I've got 80% of it ready, but can you shape it? How would you feel? You feel
Trusted,
valued? You
valued,
feel
yeah.
trusted, you feel involved. And I think that's probably the message I have for marketeers. If you have an idea, you've not developed it, maybe bounce that idea to see whether it floats. It could save you 75% of effort. If it's not going to float, you don't even start it. But if the idea floats, then go and develop it, and then cancel, ask them when it's 80% ready, allow them to shape it. They feel so valued, trusted, and they feel is their own. They feel as if they own it because they were involved in developing it. And
And
I think maybe
especially if
that's a good
that's
step.
appended to the upfront involvement that we talked about, also getting them involved by helping identify the problem. And now we've come back and we've produced some things and brought on some tools. And
Yeah,
one way that I feel like I would summarize much of what you're saying, Mehrnaz, is it's like that. It's that marketing muscle that we're always trying to flex, and that's that balance of the utilitarianism with the emotional, right? It's the
yeah,
tangible and the emotional side of things. And I think if we communicate properly upfront, involve in conversation from the beginning, you're sort of building and flexing both of those, and you're able to you're able to have that empathy. And I think here in 2025, when we talk about technology, we all need to empathize with each other. I think all of us have some sort of fear that our industries and that our jobs are going to, if not change dramatically, be replaced or eliminated. So I think we as marketers are able to empathize and bring that headspace to the reps. And I think you touched on something else very emotional earlier, and I think it was more about the content. It was about focus. But I think we marketers also could help these reps by focusing the technologies they have to use. I mean, a lot of times we'll throw onto them, okay, there's rep triggered emails, and then there's broad emails, and then we have this visit, and we have this digital, and we have, we might bring to them 5, 10, 12 different digital tools, when maybe, just like focusing content, maybe there's 2, 3, or 4 of these tools that are really the highest priority. And so I think there's that level, that emotional connection, as well as that tangible, combining them and focusing and having empathy feels like that's how you work through these challenges, because it's all unknown to us.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we think to achieve a goal, if you focus on what's absolutely essential, like Pareto principle, only 20% of things that we do actually directly influences it. Like we use strategic account planning when we like trying to get adoption across the UK. We don't work every account. We only work in accounts that their need aligns with our brand proposition. And we're able to get double-digit growth by focusing on 20% of the accounts. So less is more, because we get the depth of prescribing right where the environment is fertile. And I think if you're too busy, if you're overwhelmed, we're always busy running around and trying to do more and more and more and more, you stop thinking. You just become like a hamster on a wheel. You need to like sit back and see, what is it I'm trying to do? What's the kind of common sweet spot between what I'm trying to do and the customers need and the reps need, and how can we use our resources together to achieve that? Then you're not, doing everything, you're orchestrating it to happen, because everybody takes a stake in making it happen. It's not just you as a marketeer. And last week I was running a workshop for one of the big pharma companies in the UK. They said to me, Mehrnaz, we've got this idea about rolling this new concept around customer principled account plans. And they shared with me what the plans was. They're quite complicated Excel format. And I said, this looks really strategic, but have any of you used it? Because sometimes in marketing, you come up with these complicated, convoluted ideas, but they're not road tested. They said, no, we've not road tested it. I said, okay. They said, oh, Mehrnaz, we want to do a keynote and do a workshop design for us to help us roll this out. I said, okay, when are you testing it? They said, we're going to test it like in 2 weeks' time. I said, can we regroup after you tested it? Because I knew when they road tested, they realized this is too complex, it's too much. This is like, it's not going to be user friendly. And I think sometimes in marketing, we're in a rush to get content out that we don't road test it. And I think when you road test it, you find bumps that you need to resolve. And I think what happened was, after they road tested it, they came back, all the people who road tested it, different, from different parts of the cross-functional team, they said, oh, we found this problem, we found this problem. I said, good. Now share the problems, because when you share the problems, it creates authenticity. And then it manages the expectation. You're not expecting the reps to go and get it right first time, because you as leaders actually find it quite challenging. But what you found most useful was going through this exercise, your mindset shifted. We have to always start with that. In change management, you've got mindset, skill set, tool set. What pharma normally does starts with a tool set. Let's buy that technology, buy that platform, invest in this super duper CRM system. And then they say, okay, we spend an afternoon training people on it, expecting people to just learn by osmosis and run with it. But they don't change the mindset. I love this quote by Peter Drucker. It says, in the time of turbulence, the biggest danger is not turbulence itself, is using yesterday's logic to address today's problem. And I think, for me, omni-channel is not kind of like channels bolted. For me, omni-channel is a shift in strategic mindset about thinking about what's the problem we're trying to solve, for who, and through what channels they prefer to have that communication. And I think unless we have that mindset shift ourselves as marketeers, as leaders, as commercial people or field team, we just keep trying to address today's problem with yesterday's logic. And that's will create a lot of work for ourselves.
That is so well put, because I actually feel like that's the theme of this whole discussion today and of your book. And perhaps that's also why you don't call it Omnichannel Advantage, as you said before. You call it the Omni Advantage, because we put these words like tool and channel and all these things that are not about people, not about authenticity. They put like this wedge between us and the authenticity that we're looking to seek. And the more that we lean into authenticity with all of our customers, with each other, the more success we'll have. And I think that theme comes across. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today, and I want to thank you. And Mehrnaz, where can folks find your book or get in touch with you if they would like to do so?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. I can't believe how fast time's gone, because I really enjoyed chatting to you. The book is available in different formats. So the paperback is available on Amazon and major bookstores. There's an ebook, you can download it from Amazon, and also is available on audio format. If you have Spotify Premium or you've got Audible, you might be able to even get it for free. But I think there's about 35 different audio providers that have that. And that was, again, my intention. I said, I'm providing a tool for pharma to gain their Omni Advantage. This is to unleash your potential, realizing what you're not doing right, but also giving the solutions of what to do to address it. And I thought it would be daft if I only gave it to you in paper format.
Great.
You know, if you're talking about omni-channel, maybe the different format, then different people have different preferences. But feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I love to connect with pharma professionals, because I really honestly believe together we've got something so powerful collectively we can do together to create a healthier world for everyone, and unleash our potential.
Well, folks, feel free to read her book. I know I did. I thought it was a great read. So thank you for that, or connect with Mehrnaz. And thank you, Mehrnaz. We enjoyed having you as a guest. And thanks to Todd, my partner today. We really enjoyed this conversation. And to all of you who listened, stay tuned for the next episode of Thoughts from the Greenhouse. Thanks for tuning in.